Do you remember why your parents always checked your candy on Halloween night? Stories about razor blades, poisoned chocolates, strangers slipping something dangerous into your bag. Most of the time it was just urban legend. But in 1998, two kids discovered the warnings were real, and far worse than anyone imagined. In the fall of 1998, two friends, Mason and Jackson, went trick-or-treating together for what would be the last time. They were both 13, old enough to know the usual routes and shortcuts through their neighborhood, but still young enough to wander into places they shouldn't. That night, after hours of walking, their pillowcases were stuffed full of candy. But instead of heading home, they decided to cut across a street neither of them had been down before. It was called Willow Lane. Unlike the other streets, Willow Lane was unusually quiet. No glowing pumpkins, no porch lights. Most of the houses looked abandoned, overgrown yards, boards on some of the windows, cracked driveways leading up to dark, empty porches. The kind of street kids whispered about but never really went down. About halfway in, they spotted something strange. One house, a rundown Victorian with peeling paint and a sagging porch, had a single jack-o'-lantern flickering in the dark. Next to it was a large ceramic bowl filled to the brim with black-wrapped candy. It didn't look like anything they'd seen before. The wrappers were waxy and plain, with no brand or label. Still, the two of them grabbed a handful each before leaving the porch and disappearing back into the night. Neither of them noticed the faint flicker of the porch light as they walked away. Back at Mason's house, the boys dumped out their haul. The usual assortment of chocolate bars and lollipops spilled across the floor, but the black candies stood out. They were heavier than the others, the paper dull and oily against the brightly colored wrappers around them. Later that night, Jackson unwrapped one in his bedroom. Inside wasn't chocolate. It was something dark, shriveled, and leathery, like a piece of dried skin. The smell was sour, metallic, closer to rust and damp earth than anything sweet. He tried to ignore it and threw it into his trash, but when he checked again, the piece wasn't in the bin. It was back on his desk, perfectly wrapped. That night, he barely slept. Faint whispering seemed to drift in through the walls, and every time his lamp flickered, shadows bent unnaturally across the room. When the light steadied again, he found not one, but several black wrappers scattered across his bedspread, even though he remembered opening only one. The next morning, Jackson wasn't at school. His parents thought he had gone missing sometime during the night. Police cars were soon seen up and down Willow Lane, but no leads ever came from the search. The only thing found was his half-empty pillowcase, dropped in the street, candy spilled across the pavement. Mason never told anyone what they had found that night. But the following Halloween, he woke to a faint tapping at his bedroom window. When he pulled back the curtain, no one was there, only a single black-wrapped candy resting on the sill. From then on, it became a ritual. Every October, the candies returned. Some years, they showed up in his shoes, other times in his locker at school. By the time he turned 18, they were filling his mailbox, spilling out across the yard. Eventually, he wasn't the only one. Entire neighborhoods began finding the candies scattered on porches and driveways the morning after Halloween. Some people ate them. Those people were never seen again. To this day, the house on Willow Lane still stands. The pumpkin still burns every Halloween night, and the bowl, without fail, is always full. In the fall of 2003, a 17-year-old girl named Amber was walking home after a Halloween party. It wasn't far, less than a mile, and she'd taken the walk dozens of times. The streets were quiet, lined with dark houses and deflated decorations sagging in the breeze. The only sounds were the distant hum of traffic and the crunch of her shoes on fallen leaves. A few blocks from the party, she realized she wasn't alone. A man was walking a short distance behind her. At first, she thought it was another partygoer heading the same way, but something about him was off. His costume wasn't festive or funny. He was wearing what looked like a full-body suit, something between a mascot outfit and a handmade scarecrow. The fabric was matted and stained, hanging loosely from his frame. The headpiece was oversized, with round blank eyes and a grin stitched permanently across its face. It didn't look like something you'd buy in a store. It looked like something designed to unnerve anyone who saw it. Amber sped up. The man matched her pace. Every time she turned a corner, so did he. And no matter how fast she walked, he never gained or fell behind. He just kept the same exact distance, silent and steady. She crossed multiple blocks, hoping to lose him. Each time she looked back, he was there. Sometimes closer, sometimes farther, but always visible under the next streetlight. The strangest part wasn't just his persistence, it was how quiet he was. She never heard footsteps behind her. She never heard him breathe. He didn't stumble or slow down. He just walked with the same steady rhythm, like he was locked onto her. At one point, she cut down a side street, hoping to take a shortcut. It dead-ended into a small park. She hurried through, weaving between the swing set and the picnic tables, then turned back to check. The man had stopped at the park's entrance. He stood perfectly still, the oversized mask tilted slightly toward her. The stitched grin reflected faintly in the glow of the streetlight. Amber ran, and when she risked a glance over her shoulder, he was gone. But as she reached the far edge of the park, her stomach dropped. He was already there, standing motionless beneath a different streetlight, waiting for her to catch up. By the time she reached her own street, her legs ached from running. She scanned the sidewalks. Nothing. For the first time in nearly half an hour, the man wasn't there. Her driveway looked empty. She went inside, locked the door, and tried to shake it off. But that night, around 2 a.m., she woke to a faint noise outside her bedroom window. It sounded like a slow scrape against the siding, steady and deliberate. She pulled the curtain back just enough to peek through. The street was empty. The driveways were dark. But standing at the end of hers was the man. The costume looked the same, but this time, he wasn't moving at all. He stood perfectly still, his oversized mask tilted upward toward her window. The stitched grin caught the faint glow of the streetlight. Amber dropped the curtain, heart pounding. The scraping noise continued for almost an hour. When her parents checked in the morning, there was nothing there. No footprints, no damage, just silence. Amber never saw him again, but the story didn't end there. In the years that followed, multiple neighbors reported seeing a man in a disturbing costume wandering near the same stretch of road on Halloween night. He never spoke. He never ran. He just walked, the same slow, steady pace, always keeping distance but never breaking eye contact if you looked his way. Police brushed it off as a prank, maybe an older teen trying to scare people, but no one ever admitted to owning a costume like it. And every witness described it the same way. A full-body suit that looked like it had been pieced together from rags, and an oversized head with blank eyes and a stitched grin. Sometimes he was spotted near the park. Other times, standing motionless at the end of a driveway. He was never seen entering a house, never seen leaving one. He just appeared when the streets emptied, always watching. To this day, locals say that if you walk home alone on Halloween night, especially after the porch lights go out, you might notice someone following a few steps behind. And if you do, don't look too long at the face, because the grin never changes and the eyes never blink. In the late 1980s, a small neighborhood on the edge of town had one particular house that kids avoided on Halloween. It was a plain one-story home, faded white siding, the lawn always overgrown. Nobody ever seemed to live there, though people said they occasionally saw a figure through the curtains. Every Halloween, without fail, a single jack-o'-lantern appeared on the porch. It was always the same one, Wide, triangular eyes, jagged grin, and a flame that burned brighter than any other pumpkin on the block. While most jack-o'-lanterns flickered and dimmed as the night went on, this one never seemed to change. Its light stayed steady until morning. At first, people thought someone in the neighborhood was keeping the tradition alive as a prank or tribute. But year after year, the pumpkin returned. Always the same face, always the same porch, and always with the same flame that never went out. By the mid-1990s, rumors about the pumpkin spread. Kids dared each other to approach it, but none ever admitted to touching it. The story was that if you stared into the flame too long, the light would burn images into your vision, like it was etching itself into your memory. That was the same year the first fire happened. On November 1st, the house directly across from the jack-o'-lantern burned in the middle of the night. No one was living there, but firefighters said the blaze spread too fast to have started naturally. There was no wiring, no furniture, nothing inside to catch fire. Over the next few years, the pattern continued. Every couple of Halloweens, a house near Hollow Creek Road would catch fire under strange circumstances. The cause was never found, and no one was ever injured, but people started connecting the fires to the pumpkin. Despite it all, the jack-o'-lantern never blackened, never melted, never went out. Its flame burned fresh every single year. In 2001, the pumpkin returned as always, but that year, multiple neighbors swore they saw it move, not lifted or carried, but shift slightly each night, closer to the street, then further back, then onto a different step entirely. The glow never dimmed. On Halloween night, the fire department was called again, not for one house, but for 3, all burning at once within a single block of the pumpkin's porch. No one could explain how it had started in separate places at the same time. Witnesses later claimed they saw faint orange light reflected in the windows just before the flames took hold. After that night, the house where the pumpkin always appeared was demolished. But it didn't matter. Every year since, somewhere on Hollow Creek Road, a jack-o'-lantern shows up on a random porch. The face is always the same, the grin too sharp, the eyes too wide, and its flame never goes out. In the late 1970s, a group of teenagers in a rural town decided to spend Halloween night camping in the woods outside the neighborhood. The spot they chose was near an old stone foundation, all that remained of a farmhouse that had burned down decades earlier. Locals said the woman who lived there had been accused of witchcraft, though no one ever proved it. Around midnight, the group built a small fire. That's when they heard it. Faint singing drifting through the trees. At first it sounded like wind, but the closer they listened, the clearer it became. A woman's voice humming a slow, tuneless melody. One of them swore they saw movement at the tree line, a tall figure in a black cloak, standing just beyond the glow of the fire. The others didn't believe him until the fire suddenly snapped and hissed, sparks shooting upward as if doused with water. When the flames died down, the figure was gone. But the next morning, when they packed up to leave, they found something resting in the ashes of their fire pit. A bundle of twigs bound tightly with twine, marked with fresh ash, as if it had been placed there while they slept. Locals still call that patch of woods the Witch's Acre. On Halloween night, hikers claim to hear the same humming. Some say if you follow the sound, you'll find a cloaked figure waiting and a bundle of twigs left behind. Halloween has always been painted as a night of harmless fun. Kids running from door to door, pillowcases filling with candy, parents chatting on porches. But underneath the costumes and decorations, there's something unnerving. On a night where every street is crowded with masked figures, it's impossible to know which of them are there for the same reason as you, and which ones aren't. Back in the late 2000s, two teenagers decided to go trick-or-treating one last time before they gave it up for good. They weren't little kids anymore, but the nostalgia and the free candy pulled them out into the cold October night. Their neighborhood looked like something out of a Halloween postcard. Houses glowing with carved pumpkins, fake cobwebs strung across bushes, the sound of laughter and shouts echoing through the air. They started the night carefree, moving from house to house, stuffing candy into pillowcases and joking about how this would be the last time. But soon, something subtle crept into the rhythm of the night. Each time they left a porch, walked down a driveway, or crossed a street, they noticed the same figure not far behind them. It was a tall man in a plain hoodie, his face covered by a cheap, flimsy plastic mask. The kind you could pick up at a gas station for a couple of dollars. He didn't carry a candy bag. He didn't knock on doors. He never ran or joined groups of kids. He just walked, slow, deliberate, always keeping the same distance. Close enough to be noticed, but far enough that they couldn't confront him without making a scene. At first, they told themselves it was nothing. Maybe another older teen, maybe a parent keeping an eye on younger kids. But the more they moved through the neighborhood, the stranger it felt. The man was always there, at the corner when they turned, across the street when they stopped. Just a shape in the periphery, blending into the Halloween chaos. After nearly 2 hours, their pillowcases were heavy and their legs tired. They were ready to head home. Instead of looping back through the busy streets, they decided to take a shortcut. A narrow wooded trail that cut behind several houses and came out just a block from where they lived. In the daylight, the trail was nothing special. A strip of dirt between tall trees, littered with fallen leaves. But at night, with only a thin sliver of moonlight filtering through the branches, it felt much darker. Their sneakers crunched against the leaves, the only sound breaking the silence of the woods. For the first few minutes, they felt relief. They hadn't seen the masked man in a while, and without the noise of the neighborhood, it felt like they'd finally shaken him. But that comfort didn't last long. Somewhere behind them, faint at first, came the steady sound of leaves crunching under someone else's steps. They froze, listening. The sound stopped. When they started walking again, it returned, in rhythm, always just behind them. And then, as they glanced back, their stomachs dropped. There he was, the same tall figure in the hoodie and mask, standing just far enough down the trail to be cloaked in shadow. He didn't move quickly. He didn't lunge or chase. He only walked at the same pace, following them deeper into the woods. The silence of the trail made every step echo. Their own breathing grew louder, ragged, as panic set in. They tried to speed up. So did he. They slowed to a near stop. So did he. Always keeping that distance, never breaking the unnerving rhythm. What terrified them most wasn't just that he was following. It was how calm he seemed. As if he had all the time in the world. As if the trail belonged to him. The Halloween decorations, the laughter, the safety of the crowd, all of it felt far away now. The woods had become his stage, and they were the only audience. When the trail finally opened up to their neighborhood street, they broke into a run. The sight of their own house, porch light glowing warmly, pumpkins still burning by the door, felt like the only safe place in the world. They sprinted across the yard, up the steps, and slammed the door behind them. Their hearts pounded in their ears as they pressed their backs against the door, waiting for the sound of footsteps on the porch. But none came. When they finally gathered the courage to look through the window, the street outside was empty. No figure on the trail, no shadow across the street. Just the quiet glow of porch lights and the faint rustle of leaves in the breeze. He was gone. For the rest of the night, they sat awake, every creak of the house making them jump. They never told their parents, they never reported it. And in time, it became one of those memories that stayed unspoken. a story they only brought up years later when they realized how easily it could have gone differently. The truth is, no one ever knew who the man was or what his intentions might have been. Maybe he was just a bored teenager playing a cruel prank. Maybe he was something far worse. A predator using Halloween as cover, blending into a night when strangers in masks are invisible. And that's the scariest part. On Halloween, when every street is filled with costumes and shadows, it's impossible to know which ones are harmless, and which ones are watching you silently, waiting for you to take a shortcut home. On Halloween night, everyone expects to hear knocks at the door. Costumes, laughter, footsteps on the porch. It's part of the charm. But sometimes, those knocks aren't from children looking for candy. They're from something else entirely. This story takes place in a small town in the Midwest, around 2011. A woman had decided to stay home alone that Halloween while her husband worked the late shift. Their neighborhood was filled with decorations, kids roaming from door to door, and the occasional echo of distant fireworks. She had carved a jack-o'-lantern, set out a bowl of candy, and settled into the evening routine of handing out treats. For the first few hours, everything was normal. Groups of kids came and went, their costumes ranging from store-bought superheroes to makeshift ghosts. Around 9 o'clock, though, the stream of trick-or-treaters began to thin. Porch lights clicked off one by one, the streets quieting as families retreated inside. That's when she noticed something strange. She heard another knock at the door, faint, almost hesitant. But when she opened it, no one was there. Just the empty street, leaves blowing across the pavement, and the faint smell of smoke from distant firecrackers. She assumed it was just kids playing a prank. She went back inside, but a creeping unease lingered. The house seemed quieter now. The laughter outside had faded, replaced by long stretches of silence, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional settling creak of the walls. Another hour passed. The candy bowl sat nearly empty, and the woman had just started tidying up when she heard it again. Not a knock this time, but a sound, the faint creak of the back door, as if it had shifted against its hinges. Her stomach tightened. She hadn't used the back door all evening. Slowly, she walked through the house, every board under her feet groaning louder than usual. When she reached the kitchen, she froze. The back door was open just a few inches. Cold air drifted in, carrying with it the smell of wet leaves. On the linoleum floor were faint, muddy shoe prints. They led in from the yard and stopped right inside the doorway, as if someone had stepped into the house, and then vanished deeper inside. Her pulse thundered in her ears. She wanted to believe she had forgotten to lock it, that maybe the wind had pushed it open. But the footprints told another story. Someone had been here, maybe still was. The woman bolted the door shut, backed into the living room, and dialed the police with shaking hands. As she waited, every corner of the house seemed alive with shadows. She thought she heard the faint creak of the basement stairs, a slow shift of wood as if weight was pressing down on it. But when she strained to listen, the house went silent again. The police arrived 20 minutes later, lights flashing silently outside the window. 2 officers swept the house, room by room. At first, they found nothing. No broken windows, no signs of forced entry. But then they opened the basement door. What they found made the woman's blood run cold. In the corner of the unfinished basement were signs that someone had been staying there. An old blanket, a half-empty water bottle, food wrappers, and footprints leading in and out through the back door. Whoever it was had likely been slipping into the house for days, maybe longer, hiding during the day and moving through the rooms at night. The thought was unbearable. While she'd been handing out candy upstairs, someone else had been watching from below, listening, waiting. The officers searched the neighborhood but never found the intruder. For weeks afterward, the woman couldn't sleep without leaving every light in the house on. Every creak, every groan of the old wood felt like footsteps in the dark. To this day, she doesn't know if the knocks she heard that night were just kids playing a prank, or if it was the person in her basement testing whether she was paying attention. Halloween is the one night when strangers blend in without question. Masks, costumes, unfamiliar faces drifting from street to street. Nobody thinks twice. That's what makes this story so disturbing, because sometimes the scariest thing on Halloween isn't what's at your doorstep, it's what's waiting just down the street. This happened in the early 2000s in a quiet suburban neighborhood. Every Halloween, kids filled the streets of Maple Street, darting across lawns in costumes, pillowcases dragging heavy with candy. Parents clustered in small groups, chatting at the ends of driveways. For years, it was a tradition that felt safe, almost nostalgic. But one year, kids began noticing something odd. Parked at the very end of the street was an unmarked van. No decorations, no lights, no signs of participation. Just a faded, dirty white van sitting under a flickering streetlight. At first, nobody paid much attention. Plenty of cars lined the road on Halloween. But as the night went on, kids whispered about it. Some swore they saw a figure in the driver's seat. Others said the van doors had shifted open slightly, then closed again. It wasn't part of the decorations, and it wasn't anyone the neighbors recognized. As the night grew later and the streets began to empty, curiosity got the better of one boy. He couldn't have been more than 10 years old, dressed in a homemade vampire costume with a plastic pumpkin bucket in his hand. His friends dared him to walk up to the van and tap on it. He hesitated at first, then began to walk. The street seemed to quiet around him. The laughter and footsteps faded, replaced by the crunch of his shoes on the leaves. As he reached the van, he noticed the back doors weren't fully shut. They were cracked open just an inch, darkness pressing through the gap. He leaned closer, maybe to prove his bravery, maybe to satisfy his own curiosity. That's when the doors creaked wider, slowly. From the shadows inside, a man's voice whispered, not cheerful, not playful. Just one phrase, low and deliberate, offering him candy. The boy's blood ran cold. He dropped his pumpkin bucket and bolted back toward his friends, screaming. By the time any adults rushed over, the van doors had slammed shut. Seconds later, the engine roared to life, and the van sped down the street, vanishing into the night. The police were called, but by the time they canvassed the area, the van was gone. No license plate number, no identifying marks. Just vague descriptions and the terrifying account of a boy who nearly became its victim. In the weeks that followed, parents on Maple Street became hyper-aware of every strange car that parked nearby. Some swore they saw the van again, lurking in different parts of town, though no one ever caught it long enough to confirm. For years afterward, the story lingered. Kids who grew up there remember the warnings. Don't go near parked vans on Halloween. Don't walk alone. Don't take candy from anyone but neighbors you trust. Whether it was a predator looking for cover in the chaos of Halloween or something else entirely, no one ever found out. What remains is the chilling reminder that on a night built around strangers and masks, danger doesn't have to hide in the shadows. Sometimes it sits right in plain view, waiting for the right moment to open its doors.